evening, players. Here it is, Joe Rockey coming at you with the beginning of our next show here. We love that we're already starting off with questions in the queue. But one of the things that we do here at one of the things we do here at Local Football Flavor is that we give you the answers from what the market tells you. There's a lot of different ways of investing out there. What most people do is they go and hire someone who has one particular idea and just goes at it. That's like a mutual fund or something like that. And then there's the option of just let the market tell me. I just want to invest in the market in general. And we definitely fall into that second system. We look at what all of the bets out there are telling us and where the market is. And as a result, we find the incongruence and where the money is at. Overall this year, we are over 60% in the bets that we have been giving you. One of the very, very few people that can tell you that. Remember, 55% is profitable, and to be above that is certainly where we're at. So I want to dive in with today's bets. There's going to be 5 for this week, starting with tonight's game that I think is just going to be absolutely money-making for everyone out there. And tonight's game currently has the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as a 9.5-point dog to the Buffalo Bills. If anyone has been watching Buffalo play football as of late, they are kind of lost. Yes. You look at this team on paper, and if you're playing in Madden, Buffalo's blowing out Tampa time and time and time again. That's a reality. But the other reality is that in real life, there's something off that's going on in Buffalo, and they really have no right being an over a touchdown favorite at all. Right now, they should be a 3.5-point favorite. It's 9.5. That is a 6-point teaser edge that you can get at actual value right now. It is one of the biggest incongruent bets of the year. Yes, it's Thursday night. Yes, Buffalo is infinitely colder than Tampa. All of that is true, but the Tampa Bay Bucks should only be dogs by 3.5 points, not 9.5. And there's a very good chance that this becomes 10 at kickoff. So I'm definitely telling people the starting point, Tampa and the points is the starting bet for this week. Then we got a ton of over-unders this week that are just way too low. And the first one I'm going to settle on is the one where both teams are the home team, the New York battle. Yes, the Jets do not score a whole lot of points relative to the rest of the league, and the Giants score less than the Jets. This is a true fact. However, both of their defenses suck. And most people never would have thought that entering this year. The New York Jets are averaging 21 points per game. And we all know the Giants' defense is horrible. It's only 23. It's only a 2-point difference when we're looking at points allowed. We're projecting that game to be a total of 41 scored. The line right now is 36.5. That's giving you an over of over 4.5 points. And in the space of over-unders, that is a massive, massive gap and something that really should be jumped on. The next one that we got here, again, is one of these over-unders that is just astronomically low. And this is going to be going into Atlanta at Tampa, or at Tennessee, rather. 2 running games that want to run hard, and both passing games leave a lot to be desired. So when you're looking at a situation like that, it's natural to have less total points scored. True. But it's not that either one of these teams just woke up today and decided, hey, week 8's when we're going to run the ball. This has been the identity of both of these franchises this year. It's going to continue to happen. And even with that being said, they want to bust the ball down. They want to kill the clock. It should be a 39-point game. Right now, it's a 35.5. Again, we're looking at over 3.5 points of an edge that's going to you. That's over a field goal. And this is just how you look and you capture to get additional money in your pocket when you're doing your sports bets. The next one I have is going to be Cleveland at Seattle. This is a game that, again, 38 on the over-under. This is a situation where Cleveland's defense has showed up. But in one of these situations where they actually showed up, when you look at the games where they were most impressive, they had massive outside advantages on that defensive side. First, they played Cincinnati really without Joe Burrow, also in a pouring Ohio rain. They played Purdy in San Francisco in a pouring Ohio rain. And when those being the two best offenses on your record and you're getting massive help from the weather, it's something that you got to take into effect when you look at the overall quality of that defense. So this is a long story short of how I'm getting to the over should be happening in Cleveland and Seattle. Again, both of these teams averaging over 20 points allowed per game, both of them scoring more than 3 touchdowns a game. The over-under is at 38, and this is one that we're very comfortable in taking the over at with over 5 points of juice. Also staying in that same game, the wrong team's the favorite. Currently, the Seattle Seahawks are a 4.5-point favorite over Cleveland. Cleveland should be a half-point favorite in that game. It is one of the great spots to start off with. And as we're diving into this episode, I love the fact that we already have questions pouring into us. So let's dive into them here. And our co-host, Bob, will be with us here momentarily. So, boom. Need to pick 2. Kenneth Walker, James Cook, Henderson, Roschon Johnson. So when I look at this, the first one that immediately jumps off to me is you need to play Kenneth Walker. Now, everything I just said about Cleveland's defense is going to really roll into this answer. When they were at their best, weather was on their side. That's not going to be really the case when we're sitting in this game in Seattle. I believe Walker, of these 4, is a no doubt start of one of the 2 of the 4. And then the other one that I'm going to lean towards is Henderson. I love a Sean McVay running game when it is up and running and going for it. And welcome to the party, Bob. I love Henderson a lot more than James Cook this week, for mostly because I think Tampa's going to be in that game a whole lot more than we think. I think Buffalo's going to have a little bit of a panic attack. And at the end of the day, they get away from the run way too much as it is. Plus the Thursday night low-scoring affairs. Bob and I have been nailing the guy who's not going to be performing on Thursday night. James Cook kind of seems like easy bait for that. But at this point, I'm leaning for answering your question here, George, Kenneth and Darnell to be my answer. How are you, Bob?
I'm doing great. So George, I am falling. I do love Kenneth Walker this week. I think Kenneth Walker is always a no-brainer. Start Kenneth Walker no matter what kind of situation. For Darrell Henderson, he did have a really, a game that we couldn't ask better for, right? Out of him against the Steelers. We projected that possibly Zach Evans would be the starter on Thursday, but by Saturday, Sunday, we realized that it would be Henderson, and Henderson is kind of locked and loaded in that role at this point in time. I am a little bit hesitant to roll out Henderson against Dallas. I do think Dallas has a superior defense, and one of the question marks that I have about Cook this week is just the way that these Thursday night games have shaken out over the last couple of weeks, and the things that the Buccaneers defense can do really well. Out of the last 7 games, the Buccaneers defense has only allowed 100 yards on the ground twice, and that was split up between multiple running backs, right? Minus the
And which 2 teams were those, Bob, that they let up the 100 yards to?
It was the Eagles and the Falcons. And
so teams that really, really believe in running the ball, unlike the Bills that don't even really give it lip treatment.
Yeah, and so it's question. And even in that Eagles game, which was, I believe, that was a Thursday night game as well, wasn't it?
I can't remember
so. Something like that. And so that was the game DeAndre Swift went off, and that was the game that we were really thinking, like, okay, DeAndre Swift's the guy. And when it comes to the Atlanta game, that was split up between Algier and Patterson. The rest of these games against the Lions, the Saints, the Bears, and the Vikings. Now, insofar as those are the case, these are teams that have had difficult times running the football as they've been on the field without certain running backs. So in the Lions game, that was a game where David Montgomery got hurt. Right? And Craig Reynolds came in and they didn't have to run the ball at all. Against the Saints, that was a game where we had Alvin Kamara run for 51 yards, and that was his return game, I believe, from the suspension.
And both of those teams have better offensive lines than the Bills, especially in the run blocking.
Right. And so what we know about the Buccaneers is they run a lot of zone coverage. So we know that Diggs is going to be a no-brainer play, but in that same regard, Kincaid is also going to be a play this week at tight end. You don't like it, but against zone, Kincaid is the better option against zone. Let me finish my thought. So when we look in this situation, there's already going to be a decent amount of them trying to pick apart and trying to find the spaces within the zone that are going to work out really well. And we've seen from the offensive line of the Bills that they might struggle to go forward here. But I think talent-wise, I think that in this situation against this team, I think that the Bills aren't going to find a problem moving the ball downfield. If they want James Cook to have the ball near the goal line, this is James Cook's opportunity to get some opportunities at the goal line, but it doesn't seem like it's going to happen. So I like Henderson, but I think that the matchup is a little bit harder. But Cook's opportunities, I'm not sure if they're going to give him a lot of opportunities in this game unless there's a big lead. And I don't think that the Bills are going to have that because of the way they played last week. So okay, I'm not starting Roschon. The order I would have it would be Kenneth Walker and Henderson. But I would think about Cook, but the situation isn't like a total blessing.
I think it's actually a very anti-blessing. I think he's going to have a rough night tonight. Not necessarily in terms of getting shut down. I just don't think he's going to get a lot of opportunities when it's all said and done. But I do want to spend a minute there on Kincaid here, because in terms of the rookie tight ends this year, we're seeing Laporta go off. Mayer's starting to step it up a little bit. And we're looking around going, where's Kincaid? Like, Knox was not supposed to be getting any catches. And we look at this and say, he's still a presence.
Well, he's hurt.
He is hurt this week, but Kincaid wasn't able to take it. From day one, it was Laporta's job in Tennessee. From day one, even though he got no targets, Mayer was the tight end getting all of the snaps in Vegas. And when we look at this and say, what happened to Kincaid? He was supposed to be the most polished. He's the first one, only one in the first round to go of the tight ends. And it's supposed to be a golden match made in heaven, Kincaid in Buffalo, but it's not happening. And the thing is, there's an absolute opportunity. In some ways, these guys are a lot like Detroit. They have a very established number one receiver, and the number two is very up in the air. Laporta grabbed it by the horns and took it.
Well,
and Kincaid never did, and neither did Gabe Davis. Neither did really anyone at Buffalo.
In that game that happened last week, he did go 8 for 8 with 75 yards, right? So you're looking at it, and that's
the first time he showed up.
Outside of the first week in the season, this is the first time that he showed up. It's also been the first time that they've given him more than 5 opportunities to show up as a pass catcher, right? And so when you look at what he's capable of doing, we've only hit basically the surface of what he could do.
Sure.
8 for 8 for 75 yards is way bigger than any number that we've seen Dawson Knox throw up in the last couple of years. And with Dawson Knox hurt and the unreliability of a second pass catcher for the Buffalo Bills, this opens the door for Dalton Kincaid. And I really do think Dalton Kincaid is a really good play today. To
me, this is kind of like a prove it type game. I see the scenario where we easily can write it. Kincaid goes off, boom, very easy to project. But I also see it being him not showing up at all. And to me, this is, if Kincaid's going to show up, this is the opportunity. That Allen has made a very big deal. They need to refine themselves. They need to figure out what the hell's going wrong in Buffalo. As I said, this is one of my 5 bets of the week. Tampa and the points. These guys are in trouble up there. And Kincaid could certainly be the answer, but is he going to be able to prove that he can stack success and actually do it when teams are going to be targeting, knowing that Knox isn't going to be there? To me, this is, as a Kincaid owner or someone even considering Kincaid, to me, this is the week that's going to define if he's worth owning for the rest of this fantasy season.
And Joe, too, it makes it difficult because this is a Thursday night game and Buffalo's been having, not necessarily problems, but their identity has been off the last several weeks. If we look at those games from the Buffalo Bills and we just watch those watch the box score kind of situations, you're going to see a lot of weird things. Like in games that the Bills should be blowing people out, they're not. Like we thought that the Patriots would get blown out by the Bills. That didn't happen.
That was weird.
The Bills did not take care of the Giants in the way they should have. They lost to the Jaguars in a game where they probably should have won that game. They struck fear into the Dolphins somehow. They crushed the Commanders. They killed the Raiders, and then they lost to the Jets.
You know what this sounds like, Bob? This sounds like a team that's playing to the level of its competition, and that's why it's a tick over 500.
Yeah, and to the Buccaneers is the game that we have tonight. I mean, there's nothing in. I mean, we thought going into the season that the Buccaneers would be one of the worst teams. They're actually one of the best surprises.
I got data on that too. Yeah.
At least at this moment in time, and they've been playing some good games. They've been playing some really bad games, and the teams that they beat are the teams that we thought they were going that we thought they could beat, which are the Bears. And they lost. They beat the Saints, which we didn't think would happen really. But they're sitting there at 3-3, and you're just like, hey, what's going to happen here? And what's Baker going to do tonight? Are they going to get Rachaad White involved a little bit more? Is Mike Evans going to be another dude on Thursday? You gotta think that for the Buccaneers tonight, that this is the game of the season before they hit that November 19th at the 49ers.
That's absolutely right.
And if they win this, the rest of their schedule has some winnable games on it, and they could end up in the playoffs.
Especially with the Saints falling apart before our eyes. And Bob, so I wanted to bring this up because we're here about the middle of the season, week 8, and I went through and redid where the projections of teams are going to be, not just in terms of our total wins, but in terms of division finals and making the playoffs overall. And a lot of interesting findings came out here. First off, only 2 divisions right now of the 8 are in the same order as they were projected when the year started. There are only 4 of the divisions that have the same team projected to win them that's still projected to win them. Or correction, 5. And of the wild card teams, it's chaos. So what part of that do you want to start with? The part that it has held true, teams that are out of the playoffs that now are projected to be in, vice versa.
I want the teams that are out of the playoffs that were out of the playoffs at the beginning of the season that are projected to be in.
Okay. So the first one that jumps to the page that was not in the playoffs at the start of the season and is projected to be in right now is actually projected to win their division, and that is the Falcons. There are 2 of them. The Falcons is the first such example. The second example is a team that was projected to finish last in their division, and projected now to have 11 wins and be the first wild card.
Wait, they were projected last.
This team was projected last in their division. This is no longer Atlanta. They were projected to be last in their division, and currently they are projected to have 11 wins. They will be the 5 seed.
Let me guess. They're projected to win the division, so can't.
No, they're not projected to win the division. They're projected to have 11 wins.
Oh, the Browns.
It is the Browns.
Yeah.
That coming up with 11 wins here, being the 5 seed. Miami is now projected to win their division, which makes them, instead of a wild card team, a division winner. Buffalo is projected to be the second wild card in the AFC.
That's crazy.
And the third wild card in the AFC, and this is crazy here, is all within 0.3 of a game between 3 different teams, being the Chargers, the Bengals, and the Steelers. And of them, the Bengals take the edge. But that's where we're at right now. That projecting the AFC.
And who's out? So who is projected in and out now?
The Chargers. The Chargers were in the playoffs. They're projected out of it. Cincinnati was projected to win their division, no doubt. They're now the last wild card team holding on for dear life. And Baltimore went from a wild card team upgraded to division status. In the NFC, we had the team that was in it and got out. And I do want to point out the NFC is only projected to have 7 teams, and that's it, over 500. The rest of the division is under 500. Actually, the last walk game's under 500. They only have 6 teams in the NFC over 500. Let's sit back and think about that. That is really, really big conference disparity when you look at it. So, Bob, if you can go with the team that was in the playoffs when we started the season in the NFC that is now not. And unfortunately, there's 2 big contenders. Just which one is and which one isn't.
All right, let's think here. I'm going to guess the Saints.
Saints are one of the contenders.
And I'm going to guess the Vikings.
Those were the 2 contenders, and they're projected to finish 7th and 8th in the NFC. How would you rank them? Knowing the schedules they have in front of them.
Looking at the schedules that they have in front of them?
Yeah, one is projected to have 8.1 wins, the other is 7.5.
All right. Let me look at the Vikings schedule here. Ooh.
That's a common thread, isn't it?
The Saints have an easier schedule. I'm going with the Saints.
Saints are projected to be that 7th seed. Still under 500. Only 8 wins.
Well, I mean, they've got the Colts. That's tough. Bears, Vikings, Falcons, Lions. See, the difference is they only have the Lions once, whereas the Vikings have them twice.
Mm-hmm.
They also have the Giants on the schedule, but the Giants don't look like an easy win anymore. Defensively, their defense has stepped up.
I completely disagree with that.
Their defense has stepped up the last 2 games, dude.
They're in a game this week, both the New York Bowl, that the over-under is 35.5. Mm-hmm. And to me, this is a perception game more than a reality game.
I'm not saying they're a good team. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they're a good team. I'm just saying that the Saints offense hasn't looked good.
No, that's the biggest. I think in the entire NFL, that's the biggest surprise.
And I think that the Giants defense, while not great, depends on what they do these next couple of games, right? But against the Jets, the Raiders, the Cowboys, the Commanders, Patriots, Packers, I mean, these are not world beater teams outside of the Cowboys that they're coming across. And if they can find an offensive identity, the Giants, and get back into like a defense, like when they played the Commanders and when they played the Bills, yes, granted, it was a loss to the Bills.
Mm-hmm.
And they lost 31-16 to the Dolphins here. But you look at as that game, like they were down that whole game, but that was a Daniel Jones game, right? And you got to ask yourself, like, okay, Saquon Barkley wasn't there. If Saquon Barkley was there, would that have made a difference? Saquon's back. They beat the Commanders. They almost beat the Bills. You know, can they beat the Jets? I mean, Tyrod Taylor is probably going to get intercepted twice in that game. They could definitely beat the Raiders. The Cowboys, they probably will get shellacked by them again. And then you look at the rest of the schedule. Jordan Love hasn't learned whatever it was that he has to learn yet. And they play the Eagles twice and the Rams once. I mean, if they can figure out what their offensive identity is, they might not get, smashed the next couple of weeks. I'm just saying for the Saints.
And that's fair with the Giants.
I'm just saying with the Saints game in particular, that by that point in time in the season, we will know who the quarterback for the New York Giants are. We will know what the Saints offensively can get done, whether this situation with Chris Olave is figured out or whatnot, or if Derek Carr decides to come back alive in the second half of the season. But the Saints, this Saints team has, as we suspected, a fairly solid yet older complement of defensive players.
Mm-hmm.
They have a pretty decent defensive backfield. But the issue is, and this is what we talked about at the beginning of the season, is keeping up. Are they going to be able to keep up as the year goes on? And the last 2 games, they didn't keep up. And when you go back even to the Buccaneers game and the Packers game, these are games they should have won, and they're sitting here now with a losing record. And you're looking at the New Orleans Saints saying, well, what happened? And it seems to be that offensive identity that we thought they were going to have isn't actually present. And they need to find it because the Bears, I know Fields isn't there. The Bears will probably be a win. The Colts, probably not going to be a win. The Vikings, the way Addison played the other day and the way the Vikings have been playing, that's not going to be an easy win.
And that's probably going to determine the last wildcard spot, the Saints-Vikings game.
The Falcons game is always a tough game. Then they play the Lions. That's going to be a tough one. The Panthers will probably be a win. And the Giants. And the Giants we were writing off as that's a win.
Still writing them off. So one of the things that I wanted to bring up with this conversation, because I think it's absolutely fascinating, is that when the NFL looks and goes, who am I going to fire? And coach of the year is the inverse of this conversation. But when they look at who they're going to fire, it's how much worse were you versus expectations. And coach of the year is always how much did you beat expectations by. And again, we're here at midfield, but I wanted to bring up that conversation as well. Because as we're talking about the Saints, they are 4 games. They're projected right now to finish 4 games worse than they were projected to finish at the beginning of the season. They were projected to be a 12-win team. Now they're projected to be an 8-win team. And no other team is that far, even when you start factoring in valid excuses. Like Cincinnati fell off by 3 games. Well, guess what? They didn't have Burrow for a month and a half. That makes sense. Okay, no one's thinking about firing there. Denver, 3.5 games below what they were expected. Kind of gross watching them out there. But again, none of these teams are worse than the Saints. And also the Jets, they don't have Rockey. You can understand why they're off. But those are the 4 teams that are 3 games off or more, which is the Saints, the Broncos, Jets, and Bengals. Jets and Bengals, we understand. Hall of Fame quarterback, or at least all-pro quarterback, not on your roster through 6 games.
Right.
That's going to cost you things. All right, those 2 excluded. But when we look at Denver and New Orleans, Denver just blew their whole load to get Peyton. He ain't getting fired. Is there a way that the Saints don't end up calling this a game where he's just, or not at the end of the season, that he retains his job?
I mean, that's really tough. I mean, the window for the Saints is closing.
Oh,
and
yeah.
If it's not closing, it's already closed. The Saints stars are aging. This David Carr, so far, this Derek Carr, right?
Derek Carr, yeah. Derek's the one that's there.
This isn't working. Well, it's not working to the degree that you want it. Or
it's 4 games below what it should be.
Or maybe this team isn't as good as we thought it was going to be, just because it just isn't.
That's also a possibility, yeah.
I mean, we were thinking that a quarterback that couldn't make the playoffs with the Raiders was going to make the playoffs with this team. We were thinking that a quarterback that couldn't make the playoffs with Devonta Adams and a stellar season from Josh Jacobs was going to make the playoffs with this team. Now, maybe we're delusional, right?
Well, it should be a vastly better defense.
Yeah, but it's not the defense that's the issue here. It's the offense. The offense isn't producing in the ways that it needs to produce. And you look at these games, and let's just go in and look at the Saints schedule again and go back to a couple games and just look at let's go to what week do we?
They didn't score against Tennessee and they won by 1 point. That game was in the teens.
Yeah, that was all field goals.
Yeah.
Right? You go to the game on September 24th against the Packers. They had a 17-0 lead. They scored 0 more points the rest of that game, and they lost 18-17. So that's both a defense and an offensive problem. Derek Carr
I put them more on the offense. You got to be able to score in the second half.
Derek Carr only threw for 103 yards. And
that's why I'm thinking having a defensive coordinator in New Orleans is a bad idea.
Well, here's the
they
thing.
should have an offensive-minded coach.
He got sacked a couple times because it says in the box score he threw for 103, but Chris Olave got 104. So he was sacked a couple times in that game. You look at the game where they got shellacked by the Buccaneers, 3 field goals. Derek Carr, again, 127 yards. You go to the game against the Patriots where they won 34-0. Derek Carr still hasn't cracked 200 yards yet. He got 2 touchdowns. You go to the Texans game, and he threw for 353 yards.
Mm-hmm.
They never had a lead in that game.
No.
And
they need an offensive coach in New Orleans.
And you go to this Jaguars game, and again, they never had a lead in that game, and Derek Carr threw for 301 yards. And so I have to ask myself, if in those other games, he's throwing for less yards, and they're like this offense, the defense isn't playing to the best of its capabilities at all times, but we knew that going into the season. But this offense was supposed to carry this team, and it's not.
It's not.
But what's the reason for that, right? It's like, is he just not good? Is it that he's making bad mistakes? Like, what is it on the field? What is it about the eye test that's making
with the eye test? It's not that there's abysmal failure out of Carr. It's they don't have a running game. Like, first and foremost, they don't have a running game. And they also don't have an identity. Because I think one of the problems this offense has that he didn't have to deal with in Vegas is their check down system. In Vegas, he was allowed to chuck it downfield anytime he wanted. A lot more intermediate routes in his repertoire. In New Orleans, it is much more close to the line of scrimmage and check down. And the other thing that's, I believe is hurting Carr a lot is the fact of the Taysom Hill experience. Him coming in regularly and pulling Carr off the field, I believe is a detriment to Carr.
He's still doing that?
They are still doing that. And I think that is part of what's hurting them. Now, granted, they don't have really an identity. And that's the other part. Kamara has not stepped up and become the Kamara of old. They cannot move the ball really well at all. And I think that when we look at that, that's part of why I brought up the Saints, because, again, they're 4 games below projected. And of the teams that are significantly below projected, they're the only ones that you would look at and go, hey, he needs to be on the hot seat. The next one after
and that's the thing, too. They were projected as having one of the easiest schedules this year. And
exactly. They were projected to have 12 wins.
I mean, this is...
And then we look at the next team, as far as I believe likelihood of getting fired. It's a coach I've always hated. But when we started this year, the Chargers were projected to have 11 wins. Now they're projected to have 2. 11, almost 12 wins. And Staley is like I said, the 5th coach underperforming expectations. 3 of the ones above him, definitely you're not firing because of quarterback injuries or they just newly acquired. And I always think you should fire Staley. I think it's the way that he runs his team is horrible. But I want to flip this now to the positive side for the potential coach of the year, because there's a lot of teams that have 2 or more wins above what they should. I'm just going to rattle off the list here for you, Bob. You tell me if any of these, like, I really need to think about this for coach of the year and being more wins than they should by at least 2. The Rams, the Bucks, the Browns, Houston, Indy, and Miami. All of which are on pace to win 2 more games than they were projected at the beginning of the year.
I'm not surprised by Indy, because that was one of the things we talked about, that if the offensive identity was there and they played with like tenacity, that team would be okay. The Rams surprised me. They're the biggest surprise for me this year. Yes, they only have 3 wins right now.
They're on pace for 7.
But the offense is playing to a degree that we did not think with the injury last year to Matt Stafford that they would come back to do. Also, the defense, even though there's no big names other than Donald, it's looking okay.
The
right?
defense is spread for me for the Rams, yeah.
The Browns, quite shocking.
Yes.
From a defensive standpoint, especially last week when they were supposed to be the best defense in the NFL statistically, and they give up all those points in that game.
Well, and the Browns case also is this: the 2 games they won, they shouldn't have. They've already done, and they were massively aided by the weather and the fact that Burrow was hurt in the week 1. And the second one, the Niners, I think, win that game if there's no rain. I really believe that.
So, well, they also win that game if there's no injuries to their star players. I mean, there's
but if there's no rain, I think he gets that field goal at the end. With the star player injuries.
I think that they're actually, even though they're projected to win 2 more than expected, I think they've already won the 2 that they're going to win more than expected because their offense isn't very good. No matter what quarterback they play, this offense can't really seem to do anything. I mean, Jerome Ford is a great stand-in for Chubb. Kareem Hunt, when he gets the wheels moving, they're good. But the passing game has been really, really spotty, at least. So I think they're going to fall back. The Bucs, I'm also surprised them because I had them as dead last in the division because I didn't believe in Baker Mayfield. I still don't fully believe in Baker Mayfield, but he's proving that he can do it. And he's proving that he could lead this offense on drives. He's proving that, with a little luck from the defense, that they could win games. And I'm not entirely sure that that's not what we should expect out of Baker Mayfield, right? It's like he has been at one point in time in his career a winning quarterback. And he was in a very bad situation. He's in a not so great situation, but the wide receivers are so talented, right?
Yeah.
But it's better than Cleveland was. So I'm not shocked to see that the Buccaneers are in there. So I'm quite surprised by having the Buccaneers and the Rams there. But by the way they've been playing this year, I'm not surprised. You know what I'm saying?
See, for me, the clear candidate, if this does come to pass, is going to be Houston. We thought that they were going to have the first pick overall. They originally were projected to have 4.6 wins. They would have been the 3rd worst team.
Oh, yeah, Houston. I forgot that. Yeah.
And they're projected to get 8. Like, that's not supposed to happen. And especially with an Ohio State quarterback. And all bias aside on Ohio State quarterback, those guys are winning games. That defense is vastly better. It's like a massive step forward than I thought it would have. That team was projected to come dead last in their division. Now they're projected to be in a very competitive AFC and finish, 8th or 9th in it. And it's a very scrappy team that, in terms of indications, I really like where they're going. And I never thought that I was going to say that, considering what I was talking about 6 months ago, the night after the draft, and how they were going to have the first pick again, and how they actually traded the first pick overall away, and all of that stuff. And you think about the confidence that they had of retaining Cleveland's first-round pick and trading theirs, saying that Cleveland's going to give them better value than theirs. That's a little extreme still, but you can paint a picture where it's not super crazy. Here we are 2 months into the season, and never thought that would have happened. Never thought that would have happened ever.
So here's an interesting stat I came across in reference to the passing leaders in the NFL right now, and just like how we were talking about Carr and a lot of these other situations for pass catchers right now, and for passers. Quarterbacks here, you've got to look at there's that how far am I throwing the ball before it's caught, and that's like a game plan, and that's my ability. Like, what is my coach actually doing, and what are my wide receivers doing after the catch? And one of the
I always believe the air yardage is more important. Put the ball downfield.
Okay, so
I think it's part of the reason the Cowboys' offense is struggling, quite frankly.
When you look at the top 6 quarterbacks who this season who this is their completed air yards. This is how far it was thrown before it was caught.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Kirk, Stafford, Goff, Tua, Allen, Hurts. So they're the ones.
When you look at the fantasy list,
and you
they're all going to be in the top 10.
But you look at that and you say, these are coaches that know their quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
These are coaches that are going to take their quarterback, hopefully, to the next level. The only quarterback who also has a yak, so after it's caught, their players get you these yards, is Tua. He's the only player to be 1,000. Okay? Now, you go down this list. Can you guess who number 7 is in
terms of air yards or yak?
Completed air yards.
Probably Stroud.
Sam Howell.
Well, they're losing a lot. He chucks it.
Sam Howell at 991. The next one, Desmond Ridder at 940. CJ Stroud is at 9.
Well, Ridder should be. The way that offense is built, you want to keep as many defenders away from the line of scrimmage so you can run it. Ridder should be high on that list.
Here's the reason I get to this. So, Patrick Mahomes is at number 12 on this list.
In terms of air yardage.
With 876 completed yards before the catch.
Mm-hmm.
And then his wide receivers and tight ends have 1,141 yards after the catch in totality. Okay? Yeah. When you go down this list and you look where Derek Carr is sitting at 14.
Mm-hmm. It's too low for him. He shouldn't be league average.
He has 872 yards before the catch.
Mm-hmm.
But after the catch, if we look at what his wide receivers are doing after the catch, he's sitting at 16.
So he's exactly mid.
He's exactly mid. He's sitting above Lamar, above Carr, or he's sitting above Lamar, or below, right above him is Lamar. Under him is Burrow, Ridder, Dak, Baker, Kenny, Gardner Minshew, Fields, Love, Geno. The last
one is Burrow's hurt.
Like if we go to who has played, the most games, like games started, we'll say, and we go down to the person that has played. Why did that give me a wide receiver here? That's weird. That
there are wide receiver passes this year. A couple. Allen threw that ball 40 yards in the air or something like that.
Yeah. So I'm taking out Christian Kirk and Drake London here from this list, which was that I wasn't expecting that. So out of the players so I'm going to go down to 5. You have Zach Wilson sitting at 574 yards before and 523 yards after. And so I'm looking at this and I'm saying,
and that's not okay. You got to push the ball downfield.
There's nothing special about what Derek Carr has done. Mm-mm. And all of these quarterbacks that we listed above that, these are quarterbacks that you're probably Cousins, Stafford, Goff, Tua, Allen, Hurts. Those are all quarterbacks that are probably putting up pretty good fantasy numbers for everybody. Lamar and Patrick Mahomes and Trevor Lawrence, they're all down 11, 12, 13, but they have a fairly decent amount of completions and attempts. And you look at the quarterback that has passed it the most this year, it's Kirk Cousins.
Sure is, yeah.
But here's the alarming thing. This is the alarming thing about the Saints and about Derek Carr in particular. Mm-hmm. Derek Carr is the 6th in attempts. But he's sitting there at 14 and 16 in terms of yards.
That's what I'm saying. There's way too much check down in his world. Brad here sent us a question here, Bob. Let's throw it up here and dive into it here. You're 3 and 4. I understand your pain. Oh, the Law Purdy question. Walker, Mixon, Aaron Jones, Cup. I love the Hawk, baby. Should I trade?
Well, who would you want to trade them for?
Yeah, who do you want to get, I guess, is the question.
That's kind of thing. So where I look at this at is this. I love Ken Walker, and I have him in one of my leagues. And there's nothing to say that he won't do well, but his schedule does start to get harder as the season goes on. Mm-hmm. Mixon is a guy that Joe and I do not like. We have not liked him the last 2 years, but he still hasn't had his pop-off game, and that's always a possibility that he has.
No guarantee it's coming though.
On the line. Aaron Jones, again, he's a guy that we like, but we don't trust Packers right now. So You start it. That
I
would be a
do
hard
trust
start.
Aaron Jones. I'm back on the Jones bus. I told you he needed that 1 week off. I think he's going off tonight.
Cup
Or
Godwin
not
and
tonight, but
Hawk
this week.
Cup Godwin and Hawk is a good 3 pass catchers there. Cup will come back, bounce back from that game. Godwin has been doing fairly well, and Hawkinson, could potentially be injured this week, but he's a top 2 tight end, top 3 tight end for us.
Yeah.
London has been performing, so I have no issue starting London in my flex. I think it's a fairly decent start. Now, you're 3-4. You need to make the playoffs. If you're hoping to do something, what I would think about doing, and it might be, and this is to just get those lineup decisions out of my head right now, is I would actually be looking to trade Trevor Lawrence and Justin Jefferson. I personally, as the season goes on, and we just went through these rankings here, as the season goes on, Trevor Lawrence hasn't yet shown us anything.
I think he's going to. See, I'd rather move Purdy because I think you already got peak Purdy. The script was written on him last week how to beat him. And he's not a talented player. He never was. I've been hating on this for 2 years.
But
he's not arm talented. Get Purdy while you get the maximum for it. That's what I'm saying.
Here's the thing that I'm saying is nobody wants to trade for Purdy. But people would trade for Trevor Lawrence. People would trade for Justin Jefferson. Now, would I want to move Justin Jefferson?
Purdy and Mixon. There's people who would take that.
Do I want to part with Jefferson? Not necessarily. No. But you're 3-4. You need to make the playoffs. You're still within the realm of possibility that you don't need to trade Justin Jefferson if you don't want to. The players on your roster that you could trade that could return pretty good value at this point in time. I just said I liked London. London is a piece that is getting a lot of good volume recently, but Desmond Ridder is a volatile quarterback. The schedule is pretty decent for them as the season goes on. They're not going to have like super hard matchups coming up. So do you trust him? He's playing really well right now. So this is the definition of you can sell him and pair him with one of your quarterbacks
or Mixon
or Mixon and go up and get yourself potentially a upgrade at quarterback if you decide that's where you want it, or you get an upgrade at a flex or running back position. That's what I would think about doing, because you do have a lot of value in your lineup. Aaron Jones will most likely come around. Matt LaFleur won't waste his talent for another season. There's just no way that he does that. But Justin Jefferson, at this point, still has value. And if you wanted to trade him, you could. But I would pair something like Mixon and London, maybe London and Purdy, or London and T-Law to see if you could upgrade at a position that you feel like you need to upgrade in, if that makes any sense, Brad. Because right now, Jefferson probably won't return as much as you think he's going to return.
Yeah, you're going to get more value keeping him and then using him when you make the playoffs. Because here's the other part. You do get in the playoffs, assume that you have an upgrade here over Mixon in London and your flex is what's taken off. This team will be Bob, I think Godwin and Mixon is the combination you should put in that trade there, Brad. I think that's how I would lean. I would lean Godwin because I am much more confident that Tampa's passing game is going to fall off than Atlanta's. And that really basically has to do with the fact of Baker Mayfield's throwing in the ball. It's a fact.
Yeah, and Brad, you can throw us a couple of ideas that you're thinking about, and we'll try to work something out on the show today. So throw us a couple ideas that you're thinking about, and we'll work something through, because I think you've got a good team, and you're about 1 or 2 players away from really making a good push.
And Mixon Godwin should get you a decent haul in return, as much as I hate Mixon.
So Chandler here, 12-team PPR, QB Burrows, Fields, running back Pollard, ETN, Connor, Kyron, Hunt. Wide receiver, Keenan, Evans, Ridley, Debo, Amari, tight end, Kittle, Goddard. I like my teams. Any move you see I should make to help or stay put, I'm 3-4. I think in terms of what I would think about doing, your quarterback, I think Burrow's going to turn it around. I think we've seen a couple of games where Burrow's going to turn around, but I understand the pain of owning both Burrow and Fields, because that combination, you're going to go back and forth whenever they're both healthy at both of those times. I think what I would try to do is upgrade your wide receiver 3 and your tight end to get a less volatile tight end. So when I look at your lineup, Ridley hasn't turned out yet. We say that Zay Jones comes back. He should do better. We're not sure. Debo's hurt. We're not sure. Amari's
the one to sell now. It's about to get cold.
Amari, bad quarterback situation. So your wide receiver 3 is really in flux. Keenan and Evans, I really like. Your running backs are solid. Pollard is going to come. Those touchdowns are going to come. Etienne, he's already having the touchdowns. I think he's going to keep going. Connor, when he comes back, Kyron will be fine when he comes back, and you have Hunt there for right now. So what I would do if I were you, and Kittle and Goddard for me are too volatile of pass catchers at the tight end position, especially Kittle. He's going to have those blow-up games. Mm-hmm. So for me, having 2 tight ends when I have Kittle makes this decision really difficult for me. So if I had Kittle, that would be the only tight end I have, and I live or die by George Kittle because he's going to have the blow-up games and he's going to have the bad games. But I feel that Kittle isn't going to have a lot more blow-up games as the season goes on. So for me, at least where I would want to upgrade, I'd want to get a definitive tight end. You could probably go after a Mark Andrews. You might be even able to package something for Travis Kelce if you wanted.
I do with a hawk.
But I'm going after a tight end right there, Chandler. And we'll get to
Chandler. What I would do is I would pair Cooper because he's going to be a diminishing asset, and Kittle. I do think Kittle's the right play, and I would go for Hawk because I think that when you throw those two together, a 2-for-1 trade is very possible. And if you're in a league that requires it to balance out, just get some skin thrown on the backside.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I look at your team overall, you have 2 volatilities. You have quarterback, but there's no way you're not playing Burrow, so you're stuck with it. And then you have tight end. You can go from Kittle to even Laporta, but I would prefer the Hawk. And that's how I would lean into it. Chandler, I really like how your team's built. If you don't get hit with the injury of Fields, you're probably 5-2.
Right.
So I really like how your team's built there. Brad, we'll get back to your follow-up here. Let's jump to Kenny with his first one here.
So Kenny here, Brad, I definitely have something to say about that as a Devonta Smith owner. So should I trade Addison Gibbs for Devontae Adams and Kyron Williams or Devin Achane? My running backs are Breece Hall, Pierce Spears, and my wide receivers are Chase Amon-Ra. I think right now I love Addison, but you're getting – if you can get Devontae Adams and Kyron Williams, I would do that. Kyron Williams.
I'd rather have Williams than Achane.
But here's the thing, Kenny, about your team is Breece Hall is the only reliable guy right now. Derrick Henry might get traded, so Spears could become the starter there.
Sure
and
could.
We'll see what happens when Spears becomes the starter there. But if I were you, you probably need a running back that's going to play immediately. Looking at the running backs on your team, Gibbs is a good piece to add in, but I think there's going to be
you probably can't get rid of him. Is the answer
when Montgomery comes back? That's going to be an issue for Gibbs. So if you can do this, Addison and Gibbs for Adams and Kyron Williams, I would do it because once Kyron comes back, he is the starter. And if you can wait out those games for him to come back, you're getting a fairly decent return with Devontae Adams. I'm curious.
Yeah, and basically it's going to come down to what is your record right now and your likelihood of making the playoffs. Because if you're 5 wins or more, that's a good trade to be able to get ready when we're in the playoffs to get things going. Because Williams is going to give you basically
you're
5-2, do the trade.
Yeah, you're 5-2.
Do that trade.
I do this because Kyron is the better running back long term.
Gibbs, yeah.
At least for how they use him. Even knowing that
Cooper Gibbs is a more talented human being, but he's not getting used enough to give you fantasy points.
Gibbs is going to be in that timeshare once Montgomery gets healthy again. And
a timeshare without touchdowns, by the way. It's like having the room next to the shitter.
Yeah, once Kyron Williams is healthy, he's going to get those red zone running back carries, and those are valuable. We know that the Rams are going to be in the red zone. He's going to get less passing down work because Kupp is back, but I think that you're getting a good return on Adams. And I think Addison's going to do well the rest of the season, but you're selling at a point where you're getting really good value back. So if you can do that trade, I would do that trade.
Okay, Brad, let's take your follow-up here. You're over 500. That's good. But the 5 teams better than you. Obviously, that's not good. Would Mixon or Godwin for Devontae Smith be too much? Well, I guess, Bob, to answer that question, we got to dive into what Devontae Smith is and what he should be. Because Devontae Smith's certainly on my list of people I am not happy with. He's underperforming, to say the least, from what my expectations were. I thought there'd be a chance he'd be bumping into the top 10, and they are not doing balanced distribution like they did last year. This is the A.J. Brown show, and that's it. And I thought that, they would get back to this 500 thing. And really, what I think is showing more than anything else is Brown is still getting his, but Smith is getting divided off by Goddard, who was hurt all last year. And that's the part that's concerning to me. So until Goddard gets hurt, which correlates back to Chandler a little bit earlier, I don't want to run after Smith. In fact, I'm actually in leagues right now where I'm debating between Smith and George Pickens. And that's something I never would have thought would have happened here preseason based upon last year's performances. But it's the reality in which we're living in. So do I want to give up 2 assets for Devontae Smith? The answer is no. But I do want to get rid of Mixon and Godwin. I would just want to get not an accelerating asset like Smith.
Here's what I'd look at.
I'd rather have Olave, I guess is my answer. Olave's in a similar situation, but I think Olave has upside and Smith doesn't.
Here's what I would try to go after here, Brad, is I would try to go, and there's 2 players that you probably won't have to give up all these assets to get that seem to have a better long-term outlook as far as the season goes. CeeDee Lamb is one of them. Okay. CeeDee Lamb has been putting up yards and has been getting targets, and he's been doing that, but it's been without the touchdown.
You're not getting CeeDee Lamb for Mixon and Godwin.
You could, depending on what that owner is at, right? Another guy, I wouldn't trade both of these assets for him, would be Nico Collins.
That's a good one.
Nico Collins is another wide receiver that if you wanted to flip Mixon,
even just Mixon for Collins would make sense,
and get some return on Mixon. Like I said, Mixon could still have his blow up game, but this offense is struggling. He is also struggling. The value is about even. If you trade Mixon for Nico in terms of value, that is.
And I think, Brad, that kind of trade would upgrade you. But the thing is, if you want to go above Collins, I'm big on Collins for the rest of the year. Tank Dell being in and out of the lineup, Collins is certainly the tall target they're leaning on. That team is better than people expected, and they're scoring points. And that's the thing I didn't think they were going to do. So Collins is certainly a guy who could be an accelerant for the next 2 months, getting you into the playoffs and through the playoffs.
And so here's the other thing too, Brad, is you can also – you're 4-3, so you do have, just like Kenny here, and in that same vein, you are both above 500, and that's good. So you can go after a player that is currently hurt to potentially upgrade yourself a little bit in the course of the season. The player that I'm talking about here is Jerome Ford.
Dude, he already has JJ. You want to play that with your whole bench?
I'm talking to Brad right now, right? So.
Brad's the one who had JJ, wasn't it? Or am I mixing you guys up again? I'm sorry if I do that.
Right? But I'm saying if you want if you think that you want to get a trade going, say you wanted to do Mixon for if somebody who had Nico and 4, I would try to do something like that because people still believe that Mixon could do something.
See, that's not even the injured running back I want, though, Bob. I'd rather have Kareem. I'd rather have Williams all day long. So, I mean, that's Brad, there's a lot of options, but to answer your question, I do believe Mixon and Godwin is too much for Smith there.
If you're trading Mixon and Godwin, you could go after someone a lot better than Smith. And because Smith, I mean, he still has value, but it's not where we think it's at. So players, I mean, we'll get to Josh. Josh, we will answer your question. If I'm looking at where Devonta Smith ranks in terms of value of wide receivers right now in the trade market, he's sitting really low. He's in the 20s. So there are 20 players that have a higher value than Devonta Smith right now. And one of the players that does have a higher value than Devonta Smith is Godwin.
Yeah.
So I would not, I would not do that. I mean, for me, I wouldn't do that.
So Josh, I love the 20-man leagues. I love how you get, it's always a good perspective thing. But to move, so the question is Carr, Kittle, and Williams for Andrews and Zach Wilson. And when we go back to draft day, Jameson Williams was drafted for this period now. He's finally back. You dealt with the hell of him not giving anything and him bearing your bench. And we were having this conversation about New Orleans earlier about what are they doing, what's going on here. I would much rather have Derek Carr than either Russell Wilson or Zach Wilson, possibly the two of them combined. So looking at your roster, Carr for me would be one of the people I don't want to move. Also, you're going to put yourself in a situation of, sure, you're possibly upgrading to Andrews, but Andrews is more of the name of what Andrews was.
I disagree.
What he is. Bob and I disagree on this. But I look at this and say, hey, you've already done the cost of eating Jameson Williams' time off, and you'd be downgrading a quarterback for,
I don't think it's a downgrade.
That's the lateral move at tight end. I would not even consider that. And anything that involves Carr, given your roster, and not getting a significant increase at quarterback, I would not consider, because putting Russell Wilson in your lineup is a scary thought.
So, Josh, I see where this trade is going, and a lot of my league mates in my Yahoo league, we often quibble and argue about return value and evening trades out.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, what it looks like, this person that's trading you Andrews feels like Carr is an upgrade over Zach Wilson. And they're wanting a tight end back because in a 20-man league, there's no tight end to get back. Nope. So this trade to me looks like that. This trade looks like I wanted Carr, and you wanted Andrews, but I need a tight end back. And then to even it out, because I'm giving you Zach Wilson, I'm going to throw in a wide receiver as well to even it out. And you're probably like, well, if I'm giving Carr, I need a quarterback back too. And then Jameson Williams somehow falls into this trade. So your roster as it stands right now is fairly solid from a can put up
20-man perspective,
can put up boom points in any given week. I mean, if Kittle hits, Kittle hits. If he doesn't hit in a 20-man league, the odds of 20 tight ends hitting in a given week is not high. But if he hits, you're winning your week. If he doesn't hit, you still have a chance to win because you're probably not facing any of the top 5 tight ends. With Carr and Russell Wilson, for me, Carr and Russell Wilson right now are in that same statistical category. Like, Russell Wilson has more touchdowns this year than Derek Carr. So I'm probably starting Russell Wilson over Derek Carr. So Derek Carr isn't an asset that I'm using right now. But if I were trading Carr and Kittle, I would want an upgrade at a significant upgrade at another position. And I love Mark Andrews, and Mark Andrews is doing his thing. He balled out last week. He balled out a couple weeks ago. He's been getting a ton of receptions.
They're not winning by 42 weeks in a row.
But the thing here is that they've played 2 defenses that really give up a lot of points against tight end in the first place. And so with what Brock Purdy's experiencing and the growing pains of Brock Purdy, eventually we're going to see Kittle back into it. And to give up the asset, like Joe said, of Jameson Williams that you sat on all year, what is the reason to sit on him if you're going to go out and do basically an even value trade? Even value.
I think it's a way less than even value trade.
Even value trades. I mean, no, I'm not saying even value as in the value itself, but where teams are trying to even itself out. You can't always even yourself out. You're going to go low in one area. You're going to go high in another area. Yeah. That's the point of doing a trade. Joe and I argue about this all the time in our league. But this, I don't see it as being anything good for you. So I think you could do more. I think you could go after, if you did want to upgrade from Kittle, that you could go after somebody else. And heck, I mean, you could probably, there's probably somebody struggling at quarterback. Like we said, you have two serviceable quarterbacks in a 20-man league. And
yeah, you definitely have 2 top 20 quarterbacks. There's no doubt about that.
And when it comes down to it, when we look at quarterback touchdowns right now, and you look at the top 20, Derek Carr falls out of the top 20 at 23. And Zach Wilson is at 29 with 4 touchdowns as well.
I just don't want anything to do with Zach Wilson.
If I were trading anything there, to make this a long answer, you should try to go, if you're going to try to upgrade, go after a guy like Herbert who potentially has a chance to do better as the season goes on. Go after a guy like Stroud.
We'll be with you in a minute.
Right? Go after a guy like Stroud. Even you have value that you might be able to get something else. But I wouldn't.
20-man league. I would wait until someone's on a bye and doesn't have a real quarterback, and then use one of those two, preferably Russ, to just get an upgrade and an asset. I don't like the trade that you presented there, Josh. I think we hit that a lot. But yeah, like I said, hit us back if you have other ideas or you want to go with there. Amma, I love the question. I feel like we've been talking Rashid Rice with you all season long, and I love it. When we look at the matchup this week of Kansas City, I'm choking on my own words here, Bob. Of Kansas City here going to Denver, or McLaurin, who is where's McLaurin on here? Hosting Philly. As I've said here a couple of times, anyone that's playing Denver, play. I am having this choice in my own league. I did figure out a way to play both of them. I love McLaurin. I thought that he was going to have a horrendous game last week. He still managed to pull out with all of that wind, but only can put one in the lineup. Got to do one or the other. Give me Rice, baby. Anyone that's playing Denver, and until I'm proven wrong, that's going to be the status quo.
Yeah, and as far as that goes, Aman, thanks for joining us again too. I think that there is a fair. Let's just be honest, right? The Eagles have already played the Commanders, and we've already seen what Sam Howell could do. And in that game, Terry McLaurin got 8 receptions for 86 yards, no touchdowns. This has been the Terry McLaurin that we've been kind of.
He's not getting touchdowns this year. Sad.
He's getting 8 receptions, 7 receptions, 70 yards, 60 yards. And we talked about this last week with Terry McLaurin. And then as far as it goes with Rashid Rice, he's definitely coming back. And
well, he's on the rise, man.
He's on the rise.
He's becoming lights.
And he's looking incredible. And so when we look at what has happened, and you look at the metrics here, I'm just pulling them up right here for
they're out there. We're dating stage out there in Kansas City
with the Broncos.
They're starting to think about futures.
We have seen that what the Chiefs could do against the Broncos already, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you look at what they did the last game,
and that was like 2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah, it was like 2 weeks ago, and it was that weird. Wasn't it the weird Thursday game?
It was.
And so that game was a game where Rashid Rice went 4 for 72. Mm-hmm. So these numbers are practically even. The reason last week why it's such a tough decision is that it is so even that you're like, well, what's going to be the difference maker here? And the difference maker is that Patrick Mahomes is a better quarterback than Sam Howell.
Mm-hmm.
And so Sam Howell seeing the Eagles defense for the second time. Yeah, he's going to know he's going to probably be able to figure out a couple of things that he did wrong against them.
But they're going to figure him out more.
But they're going to figure him out too.
Yeah.
The Broncos, they showed their hand.
The Broncos can't beat Mahomes. It's a given.
They showed their hand the last time they played, and the play here is Rice. I mean, all day, Rice is the play. But I do like McLaurin's possibilities, but I think Rice is the play in that matchup. And speaking of that, I have a problem with that, Joe, where teams are playing 2 weeks apart from one another, in these divisional matchups. And I just don't like that. I just don't think there's enough time in between those games. Like they played week 6.
Uh-huh.
And now
a lot of teams do it. It's happening on a lot of teams' schedule across the league. Again,
welcome,
it's nothing new. You're welcome, Mama. But the thing to me is that quirks like that in the schedule, yes, they do favor one team. Like if you're rolling in and Mahomes would be hurt, and that could be 2 division games that let Denver skate through. But it's a cost. The schedule is what it is. Like I don't really get as upset about this. The things that we all know what it is when the year starts.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, at the end of the day, Denver ain't beating Kansas City whether they play that game
and Travis Kelce
apart or 7 minutes apart.
It doesn't matter. Kelce might have 200 yards in that game. I mean, the way he played the last time, he might eclipse 150 yards against the Broncos this week. Especially,
and the other thing is he's much more live. And granted, it's only 2 weeks, but there's been such a great growing curve there. So back to Brad, keeping the update here. Just offered Madison and DK for.
He just got offered that, yeah.
Now we're talking. I like that.
So
I like that a lot.
Josh, we'll definitely get to that because I think that's a really good question too.
Because Brad, moving Mixon for Madison is an upgrade. Moving London for DK, despite DK's current injury, I believe that's it's certainly a better situation. I think you'd be better off for it.
So I don't necessarily think that Madison is necessarily an upgrade because he hasn't eclipsed over 45 yards in a game yet this season.
Not an upgrade over Mixon, people.
But
bias told.
DK's injury right now, I would play around with that trade a little bit. I would see if you can get somebody that's not Madison. DK has he's not doing anything. Madison is getting 4 points like a week, maybe 8 points tops. He's not getting in the end zone. He's not falling in. He's not doing anything that makes me want him on my team. It doesn't.
You're not playing Mixon either.
Right. But what I'm saying is that there's nothing enticing for the rest of the season that's really going to make me want to play Mixon as I was excited about him earlier in the season, but now I'm not. Right. But DK is that guy that if he can work through this rib injury, you've got a significant upgrade there. I would see if I could get a guy that's not Madison, to be honest with you. I think it is an upgrade from London to DK, but I think that it's a lateral move from Mixon to Madison. So if you like 2 plotters in a row, his other running backs are Swift and Pacheco. I see if you could go after Pacheco. I don't think you'd get him, but I would ask to see what it would take to get Pacheco.
You gave him Swift.
I would ask how much.
Yeah, I'd rather have Pacheco over Madison if
what
that's
would it take
the
to
option.
Get Pacheco and DK and see what he says. That's my opinion on.
And the other option you have here as well, Brad, is forget about the balanced trade. Do a 2-for-1 and go for a higher upgrade than DK. Josh sent us another one here.
Josh, can you rank in terms of rest of season value? Yeah, Swift for Kenneth Walker. That was good. That was good, Brad, for sure. 100%.
Yeah.
Can you rank in terms of rest of the season value, Myers, DJ Moore, and Christian Kirk? Who do we rank higher? All right, so let's just be honest here. Myers.
That's a hard one. That's a very hard one here, Josh.
Jacoby Myers is on a pace that is unsettling. For anybody that knows, and Spencer, we'll get to your question. For anybody that knows me and Joe as before the season went on, one of the players that we were down on Jacoby because we were like, well, he hasn't really had any great seasons with the Patriots. And we were like, well, maybe Hunter Renfrow comes through. And then towards the end of the offseason, I was like, I like Jacoby. So I drafted him in my league. And I'm like, what is this guy doing? Because we've never seen this out of Jacoby before. This is not and the Raiders went out, got Jacoby, and then Juju went to the Patriots, and we were like, oh, Juju sucked.
Yes, he does.
But the pace that Myers is on right now is unequivocally, seemingly unsustainable in terms of touchdown production. Now, the yardage, I think, will continue to be there for Jacoby Myers. He's going to be used in that intermediate to at the line routes. He's going to get yards after the catch. He's going to get hit. But the Raiders with their quarterback situation is kind of hard to tell because last week was a Devonta Adams game and it was a Jacoby game. So there's
not a Devonta Adams game. They gave him 5 passes in the first 2 drives and then did not give him the ball again. That was so frustrating watching that.
He still had 96 yards. So I mean, I have Adams in my one league, Jacoby in another league. So I'm actively rooting for the Raiders, which I never thought that I would do.
It's weird.
So DJ Moore, if Fields isn't back, I mean, he was getting peppered with a lot of volume in that game with Tyler Badgett too, but Fields loves DJ Moore. And it's obvious that with Zay Jones out, that Trevor Lawrence is still, like we said at the beginning of the season, is still valuing Christian Kirk. Going into the season, Christian Kirk was one of our guys that we really, really loved. I didn't manage to get him in any of my leagues, but he's a guy that I really, really loved going into the season because he has that rapport. And rapport plays a lot of it plays a role as the season goes on. As the season goes on, who can I trust? And right now, Christian Kirk is a guy that can be trusted. Jacoby's a guy that can be trusted. Moore is a guy that can be trusted as well. All 3 of these guys have incredible value to their teams. Now, in terms of fantasy value, what's going to happen the rest of the way? Well, I see Kirk still getting targets, right? Jacoby's still getting targets. Moore's getting targets. All their values are pretty much even for me rest of season as it goes. So then you got to look at the schedule, right? The schedule now, and when you take away the player talent pool and you just look at the schedule, you got to say whose schedule is harder. The Jaguars have a really hard schedule coming up. The Jaguars' strength of schedule going to the rest of the season is really tough. The Raiders, when we look at what are the
and the other 2 teams are always going to be losing. We'll just summarize that. Yeah. They're going to be inferior teams to their schedule.
What are the Raiders going to do the rest of the season? And we go and look at their schedule. They still got those divisional matchups against the Chiefs, right? We still got the Chargers on the board. They play Detroit this week, the Giants, the Jets, Miami, Minnesota. The end of this season, Minnesota, Chargers, Chiefs, Indianapolis, which is where your playoffs are. Jacoby has that's not that bad for Jacoby Myers, right? Then you go in and you're like, okay, well, what about the Bears? Where's the Bears schedule at? And I'm looking up the Bears schedule. I don't know it off the top of my head. They're going to be running into those tough divisional matchups as well. And so you look at it and you say, okay, well, is Fields going to be back? Is Fields going to be healthy? And this is the long and short answer of my rankings right here, Josh. And then we'll get to Spencer, is I would rank them how you have them. I would rank them Myers, Moore, Kirk, but they're not far apart, is what that long and short answer is. They're not far apart. Despite that difficult schedule for the Jaguars, they do have a much better quarterback to get them through that difficult schedule. For Moore, there's a lot of juicy matchups as well. The Vikings, the Saints, the Panthers the Panthers surprisingly have a very good secondary, but it depends. It's Justin Fields going to play and open up the field. But Myers, though, I mean, there's just something that sticks off about this Raiders team that gives me hope for Myers the rest of the season. So I rank him Myers, Moore, and then Kirk. So I hope.
So me and Bob here are very different. Let me start off by saying this up front. DJ Moore is the most talented player on the football field.
Spencer, all of them, forgotten about you, Spencer.
By a large margin. When we look moving forward, though, both the Raiders and the Bears have an incredibly strong likelihood of getting their coach fired. And when a coach loses the locker room, production falls off the face of the earth. When stuff like that happens, your starting quarterback doesn't come back. People start getting benched to get the better draft pick. We start looking for next year incredibly. And as a result of that more than likely fact, I mean, it's almost guaranteed Eberflus is not coaching the Bears next year. It's just a question of when does he get fired. And pretty much the same thing's true in Vegas. So to me, by default, when we look at that starting point, not to mention infinitely best quarterback, it's got to be Kirk. I know he's the number 2 on Jacksonville, but so is Myers in Vegas. And when I look at this and say, okay, that's my answer. DJ Moore had one explosive game with the Bears when they caught a team, exploited them, and just went from there. Under the Justin Fields era, he has never done anything like that since, and I don't think it's going to become the norm. So to me, Moore is going to be last, mostly because the Bears disaster and a half. Yeah. And bringing back an injured field early, which is almost certainly what they're going to do, is going to hurt DJ Moore in the long run. Despite the fact he's the best player of this group, it would be amazing what they would do with a real offense and a real quarterback. But for fantasy purposes, Fields puts up so people like him. He's not a good quarterback in reality. So my answer is going to be Kirk, Myers, Moore. So let's jump down to here, Spencer.
Thanks for sticking with us, Spencer.
Thoughts on White versus the Bills, Henderson versus the Cowboys. Bob, I'm going to hit this one first because I know that you're going to have a longer answer with it. Mm-hmm. I'm against the Monday night on the road running back. It's a general thing. I think that there's a much more likely chance that they're just going to fall into the default setting of Baker playing hero ball and
you mean Thursday night
catch Williams deep or not. So I like the way that McVay uses his running backs. He's going old school with this, and Henderson's got a chance of giving you 100 yards. When he was interviewed last week, entering into that Steelers game, he said the reason when we lose is I get away from the run, being Sean McVay talking. And that is why, despite the fact that the Cowboys have a better defense, I would go with Henderson because he will not want Stafford to be under that pass rush of the Cowboys consistently. Yeah. And the 5-yard handoff is going to be their best friend. And I believe they do that way more than Tampa Bay does that tonight. Not to mention the Rams have a better offensive line. So that's my answer.
Yeah, and I'm on Henderson as well. However, when it comes to Rachaad White, he's been getting a decent volume in a PPR perspective. When last game he had 6 receptions, then 3, then 3, but they're not getting into. There's no looks in the red zone for Rachaad White right now. There's nothing screaming at me that, I have to start Rachaad White. And the Bills are not going to want to they're not going to want to look as bad as they did this last week. And so I think that this game does not benefit Rachaad White, although I think the game script is going to give him a lot more receptions. I don't see him doing much with those receptions. So you're getting like a floor of 6 points from Rachaad White. For Henderson, on the other hand, I think Henderson is perfectly capable of getting into the end zone, especially against the Cowboys, which they're going to be able to move the ball. The Cowboys, they have a great defense, but it's not a defense that can't be beat. We saw that a couple games this season. Henderson this last game had 18 carries in a game where he just basically comes off the practice squad, right? And he had 1 reception. So you look at the game script here is that the Rams aren't going to be out of it because they have a good passing attack. So they're going to keep moving the ball. And no matter how good that Cowboys defense can be, the Rams could perform. So I go Henderson over White for sure.
Yeah. All right, Ryan. So should I trade? All right. So this is a very important concept I want to cover before
we'll talk
get
about
into
that,
specific
Spencer,
players. Yeah. I am very much against getting the volume in return. I would way rather have the tip and the high-end talent. Now, that's as a core starting point conversation. Now, when we look at the specifics of this trade you're offering here of essentially Chase and a chain, what are they going to be moving forward? There's a chance a chain has peaked. And people aren't going to want to hear that, but there's a very good chance that's the case. As this season gets colder and Miami crumbles, which will happen, I believe that getting rid of a chain is not a bad idea. That being said, should you get rid of Chase is the part where I'm getting stuck up on. Your return of this trade.
So, Rye, post your other running backs. Post your other running backs because in my mind, you're going to have to drop people. You're only trading 2 people. You're getting 4 people back. So you're going to have to drop people. So right now, JSN is a good option while DK isn't hurt. And we don't know if DK is coming back healthy this week or not. Rachaad White, like we just said to Spencer here, has not eclipsed 100 yards rushing yet this season, and in terms of receiving, has had 22 receptions. So, is that definitively an upgrade over the running backs that you have right now? So then this comes down to Pacheco and Kirk. Pacheco has been seeing a lot of volume, both in the passing game and in the running game, and Christian Kirk has been seeing a lot of volume as well.
Here's the other backs, Bob. Henderson, Mixon, Ford, Chain.
Here's the problem. Your running backs in and of themselves aren't bad, but they're all hurt. So you need them. So Ford was your guy. You probably weren't even thinking about doing this trade until after Ford went down this week. You got Ford, Chain, and Connor all hurt. When Ford and Connor come back, you'll be fine, but you're 2-5. So you need to win now. And you need a running back to win now. So I'm curious who your other wide receivers are, because if I would do anything right now to make that lineup better, I would try to avoid trading Chase, because Chase is your biggest opportunity to get more wins in terms of any one specific player in this deal. I love
what I would think, and this is going to be a completely different direction. See if you can do something like a chain for someone who's just coming back from an injury, an Aaron Jones, a Thomas, or a Taylor, rather. I do that every time, Bob. Jonathan Taylor or Aaron Jones. I think that might be a direction that overall helps you better, because you'll be keeping Chase when it's all said and done.
And Rye, post the rest of your team so we can kind of fiddle around with some ideas so that we know what you have and go from there. That would be really helpful, Rye. Spencer,
to follow up on the Rams running backs, they're not giving anyone else the ball. Henderson was their guy last year. I know that he hit the practice squad. That mostly was due to contractual. They didn't want to keep his contract anymore. He is their guy out there.
And we'll get to your question.
And bottom line is McVay doesn't share. Once McVay finds someone, he goes all in. This is why Cooper Kupp gets 1 billion yardage. This is why when they have a running back, he's the top 5 pick you want. McVay doesn't share. You don't need to worry about Henderson splitting carries.
Well, I mean, they did. I mean, in the game last week,
he did coming the first game back from the practice squad. It's not going to be their long-term solution. Henderson's going to be the main dog.
Had more carries, and they did share, and they both had around the same amount of yards, 66 and 61. But going forward,
Henderson's the guy.
Henderson got the touchdown. That ultimately is going to make or break which of those running backs is going to do the thing in the red zone. Is who's going to get the carries in the red zone. So when I look up red zone, like just red zone carries right now, and we look at what the Rams did. So let's just go and see where those touchdowns are coming from in terms of the running back. And we'll go to the Rams, because we know it's going to Kyron. As soon as it comes back, it's going back to Kyron. That's not even a question. All of those running backs, most of them will be dropped, and it will go back to Kyron. So let me just get this up and running right here. So,
and Bob, as you're looking it up, we'll hit up your guys' answers as we go up here.
Here it is. Royce Freeman didn't get a red zone opportunity last week. Darrell Henderson got 2. There's the answer to your question about where's the better boom at. Freeman doesn't have the long speed to do that. So they have to get in the red zone, and Darrell Henderson is the guy in the red zone. So Henderson's my guy there. So let's get to A. A first, then Josh, and then back to Rye. So A, full PPR, would you start Kittle versus Cincy with probably no Purdy or Debo, or start Kincaid? I start Kincaid tonight. I know everything that we've said about Kittle of the big boom and start him regardless. But Kincaid has a great matchup, an absolutely incredible matchup this week.
Sure does.
In terms
of it's Thursday.
In terms of zone and coverage, Thursdays have seemed to benefit tight ends and running backs very often.
The home ones, at least.
If it were me, I start Kincaid, but also taking into account this could be that game where Kittle goes for 30. And
I don't want to trust the guy who's the backup to Brock Purdy. I know it's the former first pick overall. I know it. But Kincaid, Brock Purdy's not a talented football player, and that should say enough about what his backup is.
And here's the reason why he has the better matchup. Again, because Tampa runs a lot of zone. Diggs does better in man. He's really, really good at man. That doesn't mean that Diggs isn't going to have a great game. But the pecking order goes differently. it goes Kincaid, it goes Davis, and then Diggs, because they're going to want to find spots.
There's never a scenario Diggs isn't 1 or 2.
No, I'm not saying that he isn't. I'm saying in terms of when it comes down to second reads.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Kincaid's Diggs is always going to be in that for first reads, but in a zone coverage, if Kincaid is open, Kincaid's going to get the ball. I see a potential of a like 6 for 60 and potentially a touchdown. Maybe even 7 for 70 and a touchdown. Something in that zone. So
you're huge on Kincaid tonight. There's no doubt about that.
I'm huge on Kincaid tonight. Huge. I think he's going to have a really good game. So
all right. So Eckler, Kamara, Gibbs, Mostert, Cup.
Devontae.
So build the lineup basically. I'm going Eckler and Gibbs as my backs. Adams and Cooper are going to be my receivers.
Ooh, and that's tough.
I mean, if Mostert's playing, he's the no doubt answer. If not, it's Zay Flowers. Although Gibbs is interesting in there too.
Let's see here. And we'll get to your question.
If Monty's not playing, it's going to be Gibbs. But if Monty is playing, Gibbs is going to be removed from that list. If Mostert's playing, he's first above all of them. And if both of those answers aren't the way you want it, then go Zay Flowers. That's how I would go at that.
Yeah.
It's a lot of ifs, but that's how I would handle that flex.
Okay, so Adam Thielen he's been the number 1 wide receiver in PPR over the course of the season, I believe.
That's also about flex. You got a good team there, dude.
And it would be very tricky to bench the top wide receiver in that grouping there, in terms of what they've done over the course of the season right now. When you look at what the Texans have given up against wide receivers, and you go and you just see in terms of receptions, the Saints blew them out of the water last week, and the Falcons had only 128 yards. The Steelers couldn't do jack. The Jags at 154, the Colts at 128, and the Ravens at 150. The fantasy points that in total for those wide receivers, you're looking at Zay Flowers, who against the Texans went 9 receptions for 70 yards. Adam Thielen has the potential to really have a great game.
Yeah.
So in my mind, the guys that I'm looking at, as we've seen, Devontae Adams is still a dude, right? Like, I mean, he's still playing at he looks healthier. The Detroit defense, I thought they were a lot better than they actually were, but Lamar Jackson proved that wrong. But again,
Lamar Jackson does that to every team that doesn't see him.
Aiden O'Connell and Brian Hoyer aren't Lamar Jackson, and Detroit's not going to want to get shown up again. But you have to start Adams, you have to start Kupp. So this question really comes down to, for me, if Mostert's playing, I'm starting Mostert. If not, I'm doing Eckler and Kamara, because Kamara has been getting an incredible amount of volume in terms of pass catching. He's been doing not a lot on the ground, but that 9, 10, 11 receptions means the world in a PPR. So for me, I go Eckler, Kamara, then I go Kupp, Adams, and Thielen. Even though I'm in love with Zay Flowers, his stat line has been pretty much the same every single week. And Arizona has a very beatable secondary. So
Arizona also has the possibility of they don't throw the ball the second half.
Yeah.
Lamar just runs all over them.
For me, I would go Eckler, Kamara, Kupp, Adams, Thielen. But I do see what you're saying, though, Joshua, where you took Adams out of the lineup and you put Eckler, Kamara, Gibbs, Kupp, Thielen. I think that's really good. And I
can't put Gibbs over Adams, though.
That's where the decision for me is do I start Adams? Because I do have Adams on one of my teams, and that's the decision that I've been trying to figure out. And he hasn't really been – that's the thing. Like, I started him over Drake London last week, and the points were just almost practically the same. And so there's no – where is this glow up going to come for Adams? And, if Montgomery's not playing, Gibbs could be a really solid play.
Sure.
Because they're going to have a lot of – I would wait. So Joshua, wait until you hear more about the Monty situation. I think Eckler, Kamara, Kupp, and Thielen are locked into the lineup. I think those are the 4 must starts from this group, and then decide and knowing that you can decide Monday night who you want to put in is a blessing.
Yes.
Because you can decide between Gibbs and Adams Monday night. You'll know the injury report and you'll know which one to start. And that's a blessing for me. So put Gibbs right now in your flex. Start Eckler, Kamara, Kupp, and Thielen in your wide receiver and running back positions, and then figure out that flex Monday night. If Gibbs is playing, I start. If Monty's not playing, I start Gibbs. If Monty is playing, then Adams is your matchup right there.
Perfect. And we're going to conclude the show with the 5 bets.
We do want to go back to Rye, though, if Rye is still here.
Did we miss Rye? I'm sorry about that.
So the rest of his team is Lamar, Andrews, Michael Thomas, Godwin, and KJ Osborne. So Rye, yeah, I mean, your team, I mean, you do need running back, but I just don't think that you can give up with that Michael Thomas, Godwin, and KJ Osborne grouping. I don't think you can give up Jamar Chase.
No. I would go more for like an A-chain into like a Thomas or a Jones, like I said before. I think you can make that trade happen.
I think you could probably pair Devin A-chain and Godwin to an owner that's already in the lead. Maybe they own JT. Maybe they're struggling in another area, and talk to them a little bit. You could even try. I mean, Ramondre Stevenson. We're not high on Ramondre Stevenson. Okay, I'm just laying that flat out with you right there.
It's Patriot.
We're not high on any Patriots, but the rest of the season doesn't look that bad for them. And so that could be another guy that could potentially be an upgrade over who you have. Because you're not going to have Henderson in a couple weeks. Connor's going to come back. You got to deal A-chain for something. And I think the best pairing that you can pair him with would be Godwin. And that will get you a little bit more, but you can't give up Chase.
No, I can't give up.
You're welcome, Ryan. And then Oak's here. You're welcome, Ryan. I have Chase, so should I start Burrow over Stroud, even though they're playing San Francisco?
Yes.
Yeah. And here's why. If you go in and you just take a look at how the Panthers have, and this is weird to say, right? How the Panthers have played against teams. The only teams that they've really struggled with for some weird reason or another, one of them was the Saints, but no wide receiver for the Saints went over 100 yards. And the Dolphins, the only wide receiver that went over 100 yards was Tyreek Hill. And he's a freak. So why wouldn't he, right? Nico Collins, while a fantastic player, and Tank Dell, while a fantastic player, are not Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle.
Mm-hmm.
They're not there. When you look at the rest of this lineup, going to week 4, Justin Jefferson was held below 100 yards against the Panthers. Going to week 3, DK Metcalf, another freak, went over 100 yards. Everybody else on the team sucked. You go to the Lions against the Panthers. This was a week where Amon-Ra wasn't playing, and Josh Reynolds went for 76 yards. And week 1 completely obliterated the Falcons, right? And so you look at it and you say, the Panthers are a bad team, but they're not necessarily a bad pass defense. They're a really terrible rush defense, really bad rush defense.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, Joe Burrow has to be the start, even though it's against that San Francisco secondary. San Francisco secondary also hasn't been great.
Here's the thing with San Francisco. Minnesota finally did it. If you attack them, they crumble. And that's how Minnesota won that game. One of the bets I gave you last week was Minnesota, by the way. And that's just a fact. And when we look at this and say, hey, that's where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm at Oaks. I'm at start Joe Burrow. Even though Stroud looks like he has the better matchup, both of these secondaries, they do struggle against the pass. Just as a note before Joe gets to his final thoughts here, Against the Vikings, they let up 241. Against the Browns, 137. That's a PJ Walker, I believe, led Browns team there. Cowboys, they pretty much bottled the Cowboys up, but that game was weird. They let the Cardinals throw for 182 yards. They let the Rams throw for 243 yards. And then, above all else, they let the Pittsburgh Steelers pass for 185 total yards in a game against the Niners.
Good pass defense.
Right? So you look at it and you say the Steelers got 185. Kenny Pickett's not Joe Burrow. George Pickens isn't Jamar Chase.
Mm-hmm.
Deontay Johnson isn't.
There's no comparison. Like you said, it's just not there.
Joe Burrow's the play. He's gonna do fine. Don't bench him.
And again, over 60% with the bets we've been giving people, and this is against the spreads and over-unders. So being paid out the casino norms. This isn't taking, easy bets. Here are your 5 for the week. Get ready for them. Tampa Bay plus the 9.5. That should be a 3.5 point spread. It is a ton of extra points. Take Tampa in that juice, baby. The Jets are playing the Giants against each other with one of the lowest over-unders you can have at 36.5. Both of these defenses are allowing way more points than people are projecting. This game is going to easily hit into the 40s and therefore crush that over at 36.5. The next one is an over-under between the two running teams of the league in Atlanta and Tampa, or Atlanta and Tennessee, rather. Both of them want to kill this clock. The spread should not be at 35.5. These guys are going to put up about 39, 40-ish. So therefore hit the over there. The last over-under of the week is Seattle and Cleveland. That's at 40 or at 38. Again, this is a team. Both of these teams score more than 3 touchdowns and allow more than 3 touchdowns apiece. That one's easily going to get above 42. And the team there's one of these every week. And the team this week that should be the favorite, but is the underdog, is the Cleveland Browns. So give me those 4 points. That is a massive spread. Hope you guys have a great week. Go win some games. Go make some money.
Thanks for joining us. We appreciate you.